Mike Gallegher.
Continuing with Senator Ted Cruz from the campaign trail. Senator, I want to talk to you about Hillary's testimony before the Benghazi Select Committee. I mean, let's face it.
Sure.
The media narrative was that she emerged like Joan of Arc from that hearing, and yet I thought everybody understood that she was admitting to some pretty serious things and some major transgressions. But we saw a media narrative that immediately emerged and undoubtedly influences a lot of people who are on the fence in deciding who to vote for.
No doubt. And, look, it's worth noting that there are some good and honorable reporters in the mainstream media. You look at people like Cheryl Atkinson or Lisa Myers, both of whom tried to go to air with major stories on Benghazi, on Obamacare. And it was the suits up in the suites that vetoed it. And one of the problems is these major media outlets are from the very top down partisan organizations. One of the top news organizations in the country is headed by the brother of President Obama's national security advisor. No one should be surprised when you have partisan Democrats in positions of power making decisions about what's going to be aired, that when their coverage reflects the thirst for power of the corporate suits at media conglomerates, and it makes it very difficult for a fair journalist to actually be a journalist rather than simply be the partisan mouthpiece that their corporate suits want them to be.
You've been so careful, I think, during the campaign. I've watched it closely because I'm so sensitive to Republicans eviscerating other Republicans right now. I know you're in the process, the primary process, where you have to win votes, but it seems to me that Ted Cruz has resisted that temptation to try to cut the legs out from other Republicans. Rather, you focused, it seems, your attention on Democrats. We saw some moments like that at the CNBC debate, frankly. A lot of you stood there together, sort of unified, at least against the media. Do you hope to see more of that during the upcoming weeks and months, or does it time to pull off the gloves and start getting a little tougher with people like Marco Rubio or Donald Trump or Ben Carson or the others?
Well, I was encouraged that after I called out the mainstream media moderators, that it seemed to have a positive effect on the other candidates on the stage, bringing people together and really instilling a sense of unity with more and more Republicans declining the invitation to take cheap and petty shots at each other and instead trying to focus on the substance of our winning message. When it comes to how to approach this primary, I have always been a proponent of Reagan's 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. And indeed, my approach to the Senate from day one when I was elected is I have endeavored not to speak ill of any other senator, either Republican or Democrat. Mm-hmm. So, more than once there have been people who have said less than kind things about me. Mm-hmm. And my consistent approach is not to respond in kind, not to reciprocate, and indeed often to respond by singing their praises. And that's also how I've attempted to approach this presidential race, which is that if others will launch attacks my direction, I will not respond in kind. Now, Mike, there's an important caveat that I should make, which is that I think policy disagreements, substantive disagreements on vision, on policy, on record, are entirely in bounds. And Reagan's 11th commandment never said Republicans shouldn't disagree with each other on substance. It said we shouldn't engage in the petty and personal ad hominem attacks that the mainstream media wants us to be consumed with. And I certainly don't intend to go down that road, whether or not others choose to go down that road.
Well, many of us, as I've said to you personally over and over during our interviews here on the radio, are so grateful to you for doing that. And I think it raises the bar considerably, that this back and forth between the nastiness just That should not come from our side. Let's go back for a moment to the debate. I spoke yesterday to Dr. Ben Carson's campaign manager, who was infuriated after the debate and said he's proposing wholesale changes to future debate formats. Do you favor that? Do you think you guys, the RNC and the candidates, should rethink the way the rest of these debates play out on television and radio?
Well, I think the most important reform that we can and should do is, why aren't Republican primary debates moderated by people who will actually vote in Republican primaries?
Right. Because as you pointed out, nobody on that panel the other night is likely to pull a lever for a Republican.
I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell. And, it really is a skewed playing environment that Republicans just very docilely accept. So Democratic primary debates are almost exclusively moderated by liberals. And Republican primary debates are almost exclusively moderated by the very same liberals. And it makes absolutely no sense. Why not have debates that are moderated by people who will be casting a ballot in the Republican primary and are trying to make the same decision primary voters are voting? Because, look, when I come on your show, Mike, you're a conservative. You're trying to assess all of the different candidates. Who's going to be the most effective conservative? Who's going to stand for principle? Who has the best ideas? Who has the best record? Who will make the best president? Your object is not, sadly, what the object of many of these debate moderators has been, which is to tear down and bloody any and all Republicans, and in particular to ensure that whoever the Republican nominee is so battered and bruised by the attack from you, the moderator,
right,
that they will lose to Hillary Clinton or the eventual Democratic nominee. That doesn't make any sense.
Frankly, Senator, that's why we're so proud of the presence of my friend and Salem Radio Network colleague Hugh Hewitt, because Hugh, of course, is not going to be a Democrat primary voter. Hugh's a smart, bright guy, and will, of course, be again on that debate stage with you in December in Las Vegas. We'll all be out there. In fact, we're all broadcasting our radio shows from Las Vegas for the December debate. So that's sort of, I think, what you have in mind. And frankly, I think Hugh's performance was exemplary, and we'll expect to see more of the same in December.
Mike, I think that's exactly right. And Hugh is a perfect example of who should be moderating debates. Now, I will say, I thought that CNN debate, Hugh got very, very little airtime. I was glad to see him there. But I was frustrated that he was not allowed to ask very many questions. As you know, Hugh is deeply knowledgeable and substantive. I would have loved to see Hugh really get in and start moderating an in-depth foreign policy conversation or an in-depth constitutional conversation, two areas where Hugh has a deep reservoir of knowledge. But he was only allowed a couple of questions.
Well, maybe that'll change in December.
I hope it does. I suggested a couple of days ago, why not have a debate moderated by Sean Hannity and Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh? That's a debate primary voters would love. Why not have Mike Gallegher moderate a debate? Why not have Glenn Beck moderate a debate? You've got a ton of smart, serious thinkers who would do a serious job, but not just play silly gotcha politics. Now, if there's differences in the records, we ought to have the candidates debate the records. I'm not interested in having the candidates treated in kid gloves.
Sure.
You take an issue like amnesty.
Sure.
There are sharp differences among the candidates in terms of our records on amnesty. A majority of the candidates on that stage have publicly and vocally supported amnesty, and I'm the only candidate on that stage who has consistently opposed amnesty and who led the opposition against the gang debate amnesty bill when it was in the Senate and helped defeat it in Congress. That's the sort of difference that I think is fair game, that a debate should focus on. But that's different from the sort of just constant string of personal attacks and
Are you a cartoon character villain? And what about fantasy football? And why did you do a spot for a vitamin company 10 years ago or whatever? That kind of nasty stuff. We'll continue our hour with Senator Ted Cruz here on the Mike Gallegher Show, brought to you by Staples. Staples has more for less to make everything your business needs to make more happen every day. Staples, make more happen.
Mike Gallegher.
Rolling along on this Friday edition of the Mike Gallegher Show with our conversation with U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican candidate for president. Senator, there have been calls for Jeb Bush to step out of the race. A lot of people are seeming to suggest that his campaign is already finished. I mean, we're 13 months away. Do you think those calls are fair? What's your response to some of the negative things that your competitor Jeb Bush is receiving?
Oh, I think those calls are very unfair. I like Jeb Bush and respect him. I've always thought well of him. I think he did a good job as governor of Florida, and the entire Bush family I have respected for a long time. Jeb's son, George P. Bush, is a good friend of mine. He was one of my first supporters when I ran for the Senate, and I supported George P. when he ran statewide in Texas.
Sure.
I think Jeb has faced a lot of criticism, and much of it has been less than fair, and some of it is just the nature of the media process, that it all becomes a horse race where somebody's got to be up, somebody's got to be down. You look in the debate at the question that was asked of Jeb. I think it was the first or one of the first questions of Jeb. Gosh, your poll numbers have really slumped. Why are your poll numbers falling so far? At this point, who cares about national poll numbers, up a point, down a point? Historically, those have been largely irrelevant. I think a far better question for any candidate is what is your record on a given issue? What is your vision on a given issue? How does your record and vision differ from the record and vision of the other candidates? That's what we ought to be talking about.
But it does seem reasonable, Senator, that there does begin to be a sort of a weeding out process, right? How much longer can we have, X number of debates up on that stage?
Well, and I think we are seeing that weeding out process. It is playing out before our eyes. One of the ways it is playing out is a number of the candidates are getting really negligible support. And if at this point you're not seeing any meaningful support nationally, any meaningful support in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, that starts to be a pretty significant warning sign that this may not be the year for you. I think that there are also some clear weeding out that are occurring on fundraising and on organization. To run a national campaign takes serious resources, and anyone that is not able to run a national campaign is not going to be effective. And there are, frankly, only a handful of the candidates on that stage that are even attempting to run a national campaign that have anything approaching the resources to do so. And, one of the nice things, Mike, in today's modern internet world and social media world, you get immediate feedback. So following the first debate that we had, our campaign raised over $1 million in the first 100 hours after the debate.
Right. People
all over the country going to tedcruz.org. Following the second debate, we raised $1 million not in 100 hours, but in 48 hours. People all over the country going to tedcruz.org. Well, this last debate was by far our best debate in terms of the response we saw, and we ended up raising $1.1 million, not in 48 hours, but within 22 hours from the beginning of this third debate.
Wow.
It was really extraordinary. We're just literally during the debate, our website, tedcruz.org, just exploded. In fact, for the first time in the campaign, we had the website went down for about 2.5 minutes because so many people in the middle of the debate were I guess, getting up from their TV sets and going and typing in the website and signing up to volunteer, signing up to contribute. Thankfully, we got the website back up about 2 minutes later, but that's a powerful sign that our conservative message is resonating and that conservatives are really uniting behind our campaign.
I know how busy you are, Senator, and I appreciate so much you taking time out of your schedule to join us. Final question this week. Pual Ryan, of course, became Speaker of the House. A little bit of contentiousness over that process over Kevin McCarthy. Your thoughts about Speaker Pual Ryan?
Well, I like Paul. I consider him a friend, and I certainly wish him luck in his new role as Speaker. It is not an easy role, and it is a tremendously important role. I have not been quiet about my concerns that Speaker Boehner, and for that matter, the majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, have not been honoring the promises that Republicans made to the men and women who elected us. And I think the most important criterion for the next speaker is that he put front and center the obligation to keep our word, keep our promises, fight for the priorities that we told the men and women across this country we would fight for. I very much hope that Pual Ryan, as Speaker, will do exactly that, and if he does, he will be an extraordinary Speaker.
Do you have concerns that he won't?
I have concerns that the prior Speaker did not, and a change of leadership gives an opportunity for a new direction, and I think it would be tremendously beneficial for conservatives, for Republicans, and for the country, for Pual Ryan really to lead a change in direction that we are going to take seriously promises we made to the men and women who elected us. You know, what I urge members of the House and members of the Senate is let's do the same in 2015 that we said we would do in September and October and November of 2014. If you said it on the stump, go and do it in Washington. Mm-hmm. I think that's the source of really the volcanic rage people are feeling across this country as we keep winning elections and the men and women who we elect don't do what they said they would do. I very much hope Speaker Ryan changes that path, and I think it would be tremendously beneficial for us to see strong conservative leadership coming from the Speaker of the House. I hope that's exactly what Pual Ryan gives.
Senator, safe travels again. We so appreciate your time. I know you got to get on a plane. Keep fighting the good fight, and I'll see you in Las Vegas in December.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Mike, and God bless.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you very, very much for joining us. Safe travels. Keep fighting the good fight.